It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter joined by Brian Batko today. We're going to talk about who is and who is not available for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they get ready to take on the Baltimore Ravens in a game that could decide the winner of the AFC North. We'll talk about all the things the Steelers need to do in that game, as well as our pick six, our top 6 games we're looking at this weekend outside of the Steelers-Ravens matchup. All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, what in the world are you wearing?
These are my big game glasses. These, if you're
listening, those are your big game glasses?
If you're viewing this on YouTube, you can see it. Yeah, but they have footballs in them.
Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't even see the footballs. They just looked like okay. Those are big game glasses. All right.
If you're just listening on Spotify, listening to the podcast version, yes, we picked up these we got these glasses in a treat bag at a birthday party for my son a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I gotta bust these out for a big game. Steelers Eagles didn't quite cut it, even though they are green, as Chris said. Steelers Ravens, though, with hats and t-shirts on the line for the Steelers in Baltimore, gotta break these out.
And we know how much the Steelers defense loves their turnover T-shirts. They would certainly want to get some division T-shirts this week. But to do that, they're going to have to overcome some adversity. But they also
have shirts printed, Chris.
Do they? I think whoever does that. I don't know who. I never wondered who prints the shirts. Is it the NFL or is it the team? That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but I'm just wondering if is the equipment staff bringing like a trunk of AFC North champion shirts in case they win and clinch, or is that bad vibes? I don't think I'd want to bring it.
I wouldn't want to bring it now.
I think it'd be like, hey, if we win, we'll rock these when we get back to Pittsburgh or something. I don't even think I'd want them on the team plane.
Yeah, I don't want that juju.
Feels like a
ride
jinx
with me. It feels like a jinx.
But why be superstitious? Because if you win this game, you win the division. So I don't know. It's not like winning a big series in baseball or something where they all pop champagne, but it's a big game, and hence the glasses, which I think I'm going to take off now because they are sized for a 5-year-old and don't exactly fit my face.
I was going to say they looked rather different on you. But let's talk about the things that the Steelers got to go through. Now, they did get some good news. TJ Watt will play in this game. We're not sure, what percent he is as far as being able to play. But him being able to play is going to be a big boost, Brian. However, the Steelers get not so good news. George Pickens is out of this game. Justin Fields is out of this game. Deshaun Elliott is doubtful for this game. Both Dante Jackson and Larry Ogunjobi are questionable for this game. That's a lot of pieces to be missing in games that are really, really tight. You look at this Steelers Ravens game, the widest margin of victory is 7 points over the past 5 years. I think you have to go back to 2019 to find a wider margin than that between these two teams. And whereas TJ Watt being back, I said all week that's the biggest news that they need. I know everyone wants George Pickens back, but TJ Watt is a huge factor why the Steelers have not allowed the Ravens to score more than 19 points dating back to 2020. When you look at that in this rivalry, that's a big factor. But certainly the other guys being out, those are also going to play a big role in this game if the Ravens are able to exploit that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you really want to lean into the aspect of these games are always low-scoring slugfests, which the first time around this year didn't do anything to poke holes into that. In fact, if anything, it continued to prop up that narrative because on paper, it looked like two teams that were ready to light up the scoreboard. And we know what happened. 18-16, no touchdown
Yep.
scored by the Steelers, and Lamar in a blender yet again in Pittsburgh. So if you're really kind of believing in that, mystical power of Steelers Ravens, then I think you could even make the case that not having Deshaun Elliott is a bigger loss for the Steelers than George Pickens. With the temperament that he brings to the game, as Terrell Austin mentioned the other day, I mean, he was really complimentary of him. And I think going back to Baltimore, where Deshaun obviously played for the Ravens his first 4 years, and his only game back there since was last season with the Dolphins, and they got beat like an FCS team playing a bye game, against Alabama or something like that. I think it was 56-19. The Ravens put it on the Dolphins last year or something like that.
Yeah.
So he would have loved to have gotten another crack at his old team in his old building. And beyond the intangibles, his help against the run has been huge this year. I think it's better for this defense overall when Deshaun Elliott can be the guy in the box more, and Minkah Fitzpatrick can be in that center field role. I know the splash plays haven't been there, but it's still the best formula, I think, for this defense. Structurally, you saw it leaking a little bit, I think, last week with DeMonte Casey playing more, having to kind of, go back to what you did, but pre-Elliott, who was a great signing for them this offseason. So I think you could make the argument that not having Deshaun Elliott, who is doubtful, but I think he's pretty doubtful, is even worse for this defense than not having Pickens is for an offense that might have been up against it in this Ravens matchup to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing here is that, like, this is the kind of game that it's been that I think the Steelers, they're used to playing. And if they can keep it there, that plays to their advantage. Fun fact, I looked it up. The Raven, in every single win the Ravens have had this season, they have scored 28 or more points. That's like their threshold. They have to make it a high scoring game. In every single loss, they've scored 24 or less. So the Steelers need to keep it in that range. They've got to make it about the defense controlling the pace of things. And the offense doesn't need to score. It doesn't mean the offense needs to just not kick.
Yeah, I mean, the Elliott Pickens thing kind of works hand in hand, because, like, if not having Deshaun Elliott is keeping the defense from stuffing the Ravens, then you're going to need to score more, and obviously having 14 would be a lot better for them in that case.
Exactly. So, like, it's not like, oh, well, Pickens isn't playing, that helps. No, it's not saying that. However, it is saying that I do think that with the way that the Steelers play, especially the way Russell Wilson plays, like, you look at even in games where he hasn't thrown for a lot of yards, but he's been efficient, or he's been able to get like a touchdown. Even though he doesn't get 200 yards passing, he gets the team over the hump. I think these are the type of games that he's made for. I think that's kind of what he does, is he finds ways to just eke out the right spots here and there, read the defense, take the shots when necessary, and make it about can our team our team win out in the other spots around the field. Like, can our defense win more often than their defense? And if it's a low scoring game, I think that leads to the Steelers' favor. But I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenge to keep it a low scoring game, because another point that gets brought up, the Steelers, they've dominated the Ravens, winning 8 out of the last 9. This is the first time since 2020 they will face Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, because he's been missing for several of those games.
I just wonder, offensively, without George, how's Arthur Smith going to approach this? Is he going to get too cute at times, sort of like we saw in that first Cleveland game up there in Cleveland? Like, are we going to be getting a steady dose of Cordero Patterson running routes and trying to, zig when the Ravens think they're going to zag? Could there be any trickery in this game to try to level the playing field? Like, that stuff is good if it works. If it doesn't, then you're digging yourself an even deeper hole. I think a problem for them has just been the role allocation has not really come into focus without George. I mean, part of that being Van Jefferson, serviceable player, savvy vet, but like when he slides into the de facto number 1 receiver role, I mean, that's just kind of, it's just making it a little jankier for everybody below him. I mean, I think I'd like to see more, Darnell Washington maybe involved, getting a target here and there. More isolation for either him or Pat Freiermuth to try to make a contested catch, because you really don't have that guy now without George Pickens. In a perfect world, I think Mike Williams would be more firmly on the moving train at this point, but he's just not. And Calvin Austin can still be an asset, but it's all about sort of how you use him, whether you can get him in those 2 receiver sets. And I think a big piece of the puzzle would just maybe be less Van Jefferson, but they just aren't really built to do that because of how much of a consistent contributor he's been in all their personnel groupings. And I don't know that Arthur Smith's going to just completely go away from the script that much. So obviously, best case scenario is you lean on the run game and Najee Harris is running through guys, and doesn't matter if there's 8 guys in the box, they're still getting a push up front and he's breaking tackles and getting to the second level, or Jaylen Warren is getting outside and giving you a jolt. But that was not the case in Philly, and I have to imagine that the Ravens are going to try to clamp down as well.
You have to imagine that that's part of the plan. The last time these two teams met, the Steelers rushed for 122 yards. Not a highly efficient game. That's not the Steelers' run game, as Arthur Smith says. They're a truck. You turn it on. You hope you can get it on. When you get it on, it starts rolling. It's reliable. And for the most part, he's been right. That Eagles game where they only gained 56 yards on the ground, it was only the second time this year they haven't rushed for at least 100 yards. Broke a streak of 7 games where they had rushed for at least 110. So I think that's something they have to get back into. We'll talk more about this matchup here in a minute, but we ought to do our pick 6 here so we can talk about other big games this NFL weekend as the college football playoffs are going on. There's still plenty of action going on across the NFL. We'll get some of those big games next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in a car accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the question, what's next? Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's get to our pick 6 here, where we pick big games throughout the weekend. The Chargers pulled off a major comeback last night over the Broncos. I thought that was a very impressive win that makes this AFC wildcard race a little more interesting. We'll get to some of those, but let's talk about the game that's going to happen before the Steelers-Ravens game on Saturday. That's Texans at Chiefs. The Chiefs, 3.5-point favorites at home. Neither of these teams have been crushing anybody. The Chiefs have won a lot more consistently. They're on their path to be the number 1 seed this year. I think if they win this game, they might be. I think they need to win this game, and then the Bills lose one more. But
who's sneakily rooting for the Chiefs is the Bengals, because they want the Chiefs to have something to play for in that Week 18 game against the Broncos to try to knock them out. So the Bengals will be rooting for Texans this week, and certainly the Steelers on Christmas.
And that's the crazy part. The Bengals are rooting for the Steelers. That feel like it's like we never thought that day would come. But call me crazy here. I'm taking the Texans. I think something weird's going to happen. I think Mahomes' high ankle sprain, even though he's been practicing and doing everything this week, I think that the Chiefs, they have survived by some weird means and some good ball bounces for far too long. And I think they're due for one of those games. And the Texans aren't a great team this year, but I think they're good enough that they can be annoying and find a way to win this game. But am I crazy here?
Crazy Chris Carter. I'm taking the Chiefs. I can just already see like the highlight shows or even whoever's on the call on Saturday. Patrick Mahomes is pumping his fist, gritting his teeth through the high ankle injury. And it's going to be like, can you believe this guy Mahomes does it again? Even on a bad ankle, the Chiefs find a way to beat the Texans at Arrowhead. So I think it's just one of those situations where the Chiefs are inevitable. I'll just stick with the favorite at home.
I am inevitable. That certainly sounds like Patrick Mahomes. He's been that guy for a bit. Let's go to the AFC North. Big week for Hard Knocks. First time since they started the show that all 4 teams will be playing each other, because the Browns are playing the Bengals in Cincinnati. The Bengals are 8.5-point favorites. The Bengals, like you said, have a shot at the playoffs. If they win out and the Broncos lose to the Chiefs in week 18.
Lose out. The Broncos need to lose out because that would obviously include a loss to the Bengals. Yeah,
exactly. So, but if the Bengals win out, that means the Broncos lost their first game, which means that they just need to lose their game to the Chiefs. And if they do that, the Bengals could see themselves in the playoffs. And what a story that would be. And guess what, Brian? I'm saying this week they're going to get that dub. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, get out of here. Yeah, I get that they're trying to look for the future, and they know that Jameis Winston isn't like the future, but this is going to get ugly. 8.5 points. I'll take the Bengals to not only win, but cover that spread.
Yeah, all you need is the Bengals defense to just have a pulse, I think, in this game. And maybe they do after finding a way to win on the road at Dallas and Tennessee the last couple of weeks. Now, granted, they gave up 20 to Cooper Rush and 27 to the Titans, mostly Mason Rudolph doing that work instead of Will Levis. So I won't slag Rudolph. I think he's still a decent player. So yeah, I mean, it's not like that there's any shame in letting him throw for 2 touchdowns on you, but I think the Bengals defense will show up enough. And yes, I think they win this one and win this one handily against a Browns team that is limping to the finish line.
Eagles at Commanders. Eagles are 3.5-point road favorites. I think this is a very interesting matchup. It's kind of crazy when you look at the standings and you're like, the Eagles haven't clinched the NFC East yet. Well, they will if they win this game. That the Eagles are 12-2. The Commanders at 9-5. So the Eagles have to lose out. Commanders have to win out, including this game. And to me, Eagles are just playing too good football right now. They might be the best team in the NFL right now. Like they might be better than the Bills. Just the way that they play, they're physical. They show that, like, hey, when we have to pass the ball, we can. We still have a good quarterback. We still have good wide receivers. But we also just have that guy named Saquon Barkley. I think that's the difference maker. It's too much. They overwhelm the Commanders and get the win.
I think as far as the equalizers go, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes would still be at the top for me. So that always gives them a horse in the race when you're talking best team in the NFL. But I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC for sure, based on what I saw last week in Philly. And yeah, I'm going to go with the Eagles to win this one. I hope the Commanders are a little bit frisky at home, but I mean, it's going to be a situation where there's plenty of Eagles fans in DC, not even DC, Landover, Maryland anyway. I don't know how much of a true home field advantage it'll be at Northwest Stadium. So yeah, I think the season's gotten away from Washington a little bit. I will go with Philly on the road.
Titans at Colts. The Colts are 3.5-point favorites at home. Mason Rudolph will start for the Tennessee Titans. How about that?
This is the game he should have got to start last year when Mitch Trubisky went into Indy and got benched at the very end. So he's going to use that as fuel for the fire.
Redemption.
Remember, we all thought it was like, oh, Mason's getting mop-up duty here because Mitch can't even beat the Colts.
And then, no, that was Mason getting ready for the ride of his life.
Warming up the arm.
Oh, my gosh. That was a crazy times.
Good times.
Good times. But yeah, so Colts in this game, it's a must-have for them. I think they're going to win it simply because the Titans are a bad team. I know that people in Pittsburgh are going to be pulling for Mason Rudolph. It's nothing against him. The Titans are just a bad team. And I think that the Colts got enough to pull over. But the Colts, they have kind of fallen off as well. They have not proven to be nearly as consistent as they hoped, but they need to win this game to get to 7-8 and to stay in the playoff hunt. I think they do.
I do not. I think I'm taking the Titans on the road here in the upset. I want to say the Colts actually needed the Broncos to beat not needed, but it would have been better for them if the Broncos beat the Chargers last night because of some tiebreakers. So I think sometimes when you're like just hanging on the fringe of the playoff picture and results around the league that you don't even control don't go your way, that can be bad for morale. I'm going to go with the Titans. I've seen a team late in the year energized by Mason Rudolph for the final 3-game stretch before. And I'm going to ride that again here for the Tennessee Titans.
Mason Rudolph coming up big there.
They're going to call him Mr. December after the run the Titans go on right here.
Terrible.
And then he'll get paid, and then he'll get another new. Well, maybe he'll stay in Tennessee. I don't
know.
Whatever would be better for him, but I think he finishes a season on a high note again. Put it that way.
All the Rudolph jokes are going to be popping
It
off
is
again.
kind of like just it's fitting for him. It's kind of a mystical, you got to believe.
Indeed.
They got the Colts,
Vikings,
Jags, and Texans. He actually could
he actually could go on a run.
finish 3-0.
That'd be some wild
All
stuff,
right, what do we
man.
got next?
Mr. Deceiver.
Vikings, Hawks.
Vikings, Seahawks. Vikings are 3-point road favorites. Give me the Vikings. They're playing some good football right now. I know we've both been doubters on the Sam Darnold train. I think that defense is tough. I know that Seattle could be a real tough place to play. These two teams have had some very wonky games go between them, but give me Minnesota. I think they're going to find a way to win.
Sam, the man, Darnold. I've been believing in him all year. I'm going to go with him again on the road at Seattle for a team that, one thing I actually have been saying all year is just the Seahawks, I feel like, are very Jekyll and Hyde. I feel like they're going to bring their best 1 week or even for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then it can kind of go the other way on them. And that's clearly what happened last week at home against the Pack. So I think they lose another one at home to another good NFC North team, and that defense is a little bit too much for Geno Smith and first-year offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb to handle.
Agreed there. Last game that we're going to do, Niners at Dolphins. Dolphins are 1.5-point favorites. This game is on the East Coast. The Niners are so hurt up. They're down 4 running backs, and they still won't play Izzy Abanikanda. But looking at this game, both these teams are on life support. The Niners are at 6-8. The Dolphins are at 6-8. The Niners have a lot more traffic ahead of them. As far as the NFC playoffs, the last team in the playoffs right now in the NFC is a 9-5 Washington team. Seattle 8-6, Falcons, Cardinals at 7-7, and then you got the Niners at 6-8. Crazy enough, the Cowboys are also 6-8 and still in this. Meanwhile, you look to the AFC. It is a much clearer picture for Miami. They're 6-8, tied with the Bengals and the Colts. They're the only other teams that can even make the playoffs this year right now. And you got a 9-6 Broncos, a 9-6 Chargers, and a 9-5 Ravens team all sitting right there in front of you, holding on to those wild card spots. Because of that, I'm going to take Miami. I think that they're going to come in a little bit more motivated. They didn't play well last week, but this is a hurt up Niners team. They're coming to the East Coast. I think that they're kind of sensing this season's a bit over. Like, even if they win this game, it's not looking good for them. The Dolphins, they can find a win with this game, keep their playoff hopes alive, and I think that's enough to keep them around for one more week.
I'm picking the Niners. I'm picking the Niners on the road, even on the cross-country trip. I agree with you that they can see their season just slipping away. But maybe when you have something like the Devondre Campbell situation last Thursday night against the Rams, where he just walks off the field, maybe they can galvanize a group, bring people together, remember the reason for the season, or in this case, the reason for playing team sports, to try to go and win the game. Plus, my other big factor in this one, Kyle Shanahan coaching against Mike McDaniel. He's going to little bro him. He's going to little bro him, man. He's going to have every answer for the Dolphins. Give me San Fran on the road.
Crazy enough, it seems like players not wanting to go in when their coaches tell them has become a theme. The Ravens have had that. Does that use they use that as motivation? As Deontay Johnson?
That's more of like a just out of sight, out of mind. Like the Niners, I've never seen players talk that bluntly about it.
Yeah,
still a guy like in the fraternity, of NFL players, and I think normally you'd see a team be like, oh, he's going through a lot and you can't see it all from the outside. No, everybody from like Mooney Ward to Diamador Lenore to George Kittle were like, screw this guy. This guy, I never want to be around this guy again. So maybe the Niners do still care a little bit.
This guy's Devondre Campbell. He's a former first-team All-Pro linebacker.
That's what I'm saying. He's not a scrub either, and he's a vet in the league. Normally, the guys like that get the benefit of the doubt from teammates, kind of like the Ravens have given Deontay Johnson. Like, none of those guys are talking crazy about him. But
yeah, that situation is nuts. But we'll talk about
and we're going to talk all about Deontay Johnson in the third segment, right?
No,
we're going to talk about another.
There you go.
Not Kyle Shanahan or Mike McDaniel, but another big brother, little brother situation here in the third segment.
We'll be talking about that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, remind you this show is brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun-to-drive HRV, and versatile CRV. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. It's time to look at Steelers at Ravens. The Steelers are 6.5-point dogs. They've been 6.5-point dogs all week long. That has not budged. The over-unders moved up and down, but it's right now settled at 44.5 points here. Brian, Deontay Johnson's not playing in this game.
I was just joking.
Yeah. Like, we of course. But they also might be missing Rashad Bateman. They also might be missing Nelson Aguilar. That's a hurt-up receiver room.
That'd be a good thing when they play the Steelers. Remember Aguilar a couple of years ago?
Unlike Aguilar.
Yeah, and that.
But the Bateman went off last week. I think he had 2 touchdowns. He was playing really well. And you take away those weapons from Lamar Jackson, Joey Porter Jr., he was great against Zay Flowers. I think that was made up his best showing of the year. And funny enough, I feel like Joey Porter Jr., his best showing to come against the Ravens. He had his first career interception on Lamar Jackson. He played really well in this last game against Lamar Jackson. It locked him down and had that big stop on the 2-point conversion. I think that this could be something that works in the Steelers' favor, that, whereas none of those players have the impact to the Ravens offense the way that George Pickens has an impact for the Steelers offense. But, I do think that's something that in a game where the Steelers defense is going to need to muddy this up, I think that there is a chance that they could still do that.
I'll be curious to see, do the Ravens try to test that TJ Watt ankle? Are they running right at him off the bat? Are they saying, we're not scared of you because you're not 100%? Is TJ himself on a little bit of a pitch count in this game because of that? I don't know. I'm sure he'll be feeling the adrenaline, to say the least, on Saturday. And for the Ravens, I mean, if you can't beat the Steelers in this game at home with the injuries on the other side, like, Mike Tomlin really will own you at that point. The Steelers really will own you. I know there's been some chatter this week of, like, is Steelers Ravens, is it the best rivalry in the NFL, or is it not even really a rivalry now that it's 8 out of 9, 4 in a row for the Steelers? They beat them at home. They beat them on the road. They beat them with Kenny Pickett. They beat them with Russell Wilson. They beat them with Ben. They beat Lamar. They beat Tyler Huntley. Like, they win close. Well, I guess they don't win anything other than close, but they win close games. And I'm someone who, I felt like Steelers fans were being a bit haughty if they thought Steelers Browns isn't a rivalry, because obviously historically franchise success, all that, like, it's no contest. It's not even a discussion. But in terms of the individual games between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, like, basically trading back and forth over the last 5 or 6 years, like, really no way around that mountain. So if I'm going to use that logic to say Steelers Browns is more of a rivalry than people give it credit for, Steelers Ravens is less of a rivalry than people give it credit for, because the Steelers have their number and they just find ways to beat them just about every single time.
And it's crazy enough. You look at the series between these teams, it was 27-24 Steelers before this stretch of 9 games. The Steelers won 8. It's now 36-25 Steelers.
Running it up.
That's the thing. Like, this used to be back and forth. Like, and there'd be times that certain teams got their get backs. Like, I remember from 2007 to 2011 or 2010, like those 4 seasons, the Steelers never lost to the Ravens when Ben Roethlisberger started. The only time they beat him was when Ben Roethlisberger didn't start. And then in the early 2010s when Joe Flacco and that crew became really good and the Steelers were kind of coming down from their late 2000s run, the Ravens had control of the rivalry and they went back and forth. And now it's not a back and forth anymore. It's just straight up dominance by the Steelers. And to me, a big factor in this game is going to be the Ravens needing to show that's not in their heads, because you got Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator, chasing down his receivers in practice, being like, they're going to punch the ball out. They're going to punch the ball out. And I mean, that's what Patrick Queen did to Isaiah Likely last time these two
and
teams
what Nick
played.
Herbig did to Derrick Henry, which is like ridiculous to even conceive of, but it happened. I watched it. We all saw it.
Exactly. I mean, this Steelers team, say what you want about, you can't count on turnovers. They've got 30 of them, and they lead the NFL, and that's going to be a big factor in this game. It's been a big factor in this game. You look at the history of where this rivalry's been in the in the 2020s. Since 2020, the highest amount of points scored by either team is when the Steelers put up 28 points in that first win in Baltimore in 2020, back when Robert Spillane had a pick six on Lamar Jackson, if y'all remember that game. And then since then, no team has scored more than 20 points, and that was only touched once by the Steelers in their 2019 win in December of 2021 over the Ravens. Every other game, like this year, 18-16. Last year, 2 17-10 wins for the Steelers. That's the largest margin of victory, by the way, going back to 2019 in this rivalry, was both of those games last year. 16-13, 16-14, 16-13, 2019. This is what the Steelers-Ravens have been, and it is tough for me to think that this is going to be any different this time around, when that's just who these two teams are. And it's not even about the Steelers own. These two teams know each other well. It's just in the key moments, the Steelers continue to find the ways to win them.
I think it's a fine line sometimes between Steelers knowing how to win and always making the Ravens feel them in this game and always bringing the juice. And simply, I mean, from a technique standpoint, they are very good at forcing turnovers. I mean, the punch outs are probably TJ Watt's like signature play at this point when he's getting enshrined in Canton. Someday there's going to be a whole cut up highlight of him punching the ball out either on a strip sack or from a ball carrier. But Nick Herbig has learned how to do that really well. It's contagious around this team. And yet there's also a little bit of puck luck. I mean, a ball goes on the ground, and I think we kind of just logically, it's sort of a 50-50 shot at that point in football. If it's bouncing around, you don't know who's going to come up with that. Field goal kicking has long been an edge for the Ravens, but not now, at least not in the last game when Justin Tucker couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. When it comes down to a singular play, the Steelers have risen up, but 2-point conversions can often go either way. The Ravens are really good. They're the best red zone efficiency team, so there's no reason why they shouldn't be good at the goal line, and yet the Steelers always find a way to stop them, it seems like. So I think there's been a little bit of, I don't want to say flukiness, but just coin flips that could have gone either way that I worry for the Steelers' sake are just bound to turn to Baltimore's side at some point here.
I feel you on that. Like, traditionally, you think when teams win a lot of close games back to back, like the Chiefs have, eventually you feel like that's just going to turn on its own. There's the football gods, there's the luck of the game, there's the bounce of the ball.
The Steelers and Chiefs are some of the best at it statistically, and we watch how they do it, but you can't necessarily rely on that all the time, because it's still a one-score game is just
anything can
by
happen.
By definition, less margin for error.
Yeah, I feel you on that, man. And I think that does play a factor in here. And it's funny. I'm a big X's and O's guy. I love breaking down, matchups and techniques and what styles best fit these certain fights. But sometimes there's those intangibles that play into it, and that maybe the Ravens are just due for a big win in this rivalry. And let's also point this out. The Steelers, while we're talking about the Steelers, needing to win this game, and if they win this game, they get the hats and the T-shirts. They win the AFC North. If the Ravens win this game, they stay alive, and I think that is where they are their backs are against the wall. And if they lose this game, they're not out of the playoffs. They're most likely going to be in the playoffs, but I think it will be such a demoralizer for this team. And it's funny, like if the Steelers win this game and they played the Ravens again in the playoffs, I think that would weigh so much heavier on them than if they were able to split with them and then they come back and then they have some confidence in that one. But if they get swept again this year, that'd be tough. So with that being said, let's get to our picks here. Brian, what's the X factor that you have being the key thing that turns the tide of this game? What's your final score prediction?
I mean, like you said, the X factor in Steelers Ravens, it almost seems like it's more emotional, or just you can't put your finger on what exactly it is, than anything X's and O's, because the first game in this series this season, everything X's and O's wise and schematic would have told you there's going to be a lot of points scored on both sides. These offenses are going to roll. That wasn't what happened at all. So I think I'll just boil it down to, I think a player as good as Lamar, you can only have answers for him for so long. You can only get the best of him for so long. This was my analysis the first game around, and it wasn't correct. And I picked the Ravens, and I was wrong. But I'm just going to bet on that guy again to make a big play, whether it's with his arm or with his legs, juke somebody out, or hit that pinpoint pass that he always seems to miss against the Steelers. And I think that will be the deciding factor. And I'm going to go still a little bit lower scoring than I think the Ravens would prefer, but I'll go Ravens 18, Steelers 14.
I have a very similar score, 19-14, but I'm going with the Steelers. I think that they have won this rivalry. I went with the Eagles last week because I felt like that was this, but
I went with the Steelers, which was dumb. I was kind of counting on the Mike Tomlin voodoo magic to find a way to get over the hump in Philly.
He wore black forces last week. They just didn't work.
It wasn't even close to happening, really. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There were a couple plays here or there that if they go the other way.
Look, the Steelers, it was a 4-point game at halftime and 7-point. They had the ball with down seven in the middle of the third quarter. You got away from them late because the Eagles controlled the ball for the second half. But in all seriousness about this game, I lean towards the Steelers' dominance here. There's some point that when teams can't do it, you got to prove to me that you can. And I give teams across in any sport grace to you know what, that might have been a 1-off, that might have been a 2-off, that might have been a 3-off. This is an 8 out of 9 off, and I feel like the Ravens, you're at the point where you're like the Browns, like people at the beginning of the season were like, oh, the Browns could win the division. I'm like, they got to do it for me, man. They have not won a division since the 80s, so get out of here. I'm picking them to finish last, and I was right about them. Now the Ravens are not the Browns, but they are playing. This rivalry has devolved to a Steelers-Browns feel with how often the Steelers have won. I think the X factor in this game is that the defense is going to create some turnover-worthy plays and maybe even some plays where they score themselves, and that sets the pace, and it makes it so that Russell Wilson can do just enough to get them over the hump. Yeah, I think what you do is you might get a defensive touchdown and then a whole whopping group of field goals for Chris Boswell again, and that gets him enough points to keep the Ravens at bay again. I got the Steelers winning 19-14. So us very similar scores just for the different teams this week.
I just think if the Ravens didn't have Lamar at quarterback, a guy that I really think is legit and the real deal, I would be.
Oh, I think so too.
I'd be more inclined to go with what you're saying there. But hey, if I keep putting my money on the guy and I go down that way, then so be it. But I think he's legit. I think he'll win a Super Bowl at some point in his career. But first, get through the Steelers for, well, not one time. He's done it a second time. At home a first time.
At home a first time, second time, it'll be the first time he's beaten the Steelers. If he does so, it'll be the first time since they played Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges back in 2019, the last time that he played them. But
also wonky stuff had to happen in that game too. Juju had to fumble, and it was a great punch out by Marlon Humphrey. He's probably as good at it as any corner, but again, those things can be they can go either way a lot of the time.
They can go a lot of different directions. We'll keep you covered with all things there. Brian and our team of writers will be in Baltimore for this one. I'll be at the Peterson Event Center covering Pitt hosting Sam Houston with Stephen Thompson. We'll be covering that game as Pitt basketball finishes up their non-conference strength of schedule. But you can get all of our sports updates at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Subscribe to this podcast as well as all of our content here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's YouTube channel. If you're watching here on YouTube, subscribe here and get all of these Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes. You can also do so on your favorite podcasting app. Just search Post-Gazette Sports. Look up the North Shore Drive podcast. You'll get all of the daily content as well there. Thanks again for tuning in to everyone. We will have our team from Baltimore, giving you their thoughts here on this channel for post-game, and then we'll be getting you on a quick turnaround, getting you ready for Steelers Chiefs on Christmas Day. It's going to be action-packed during the holidays. We'll see you here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.